Okay, so let's get started. Today we're going to run through our CAPPS tool. So this is a tool that we made several years ago. The tool started off as a tool we made for a particular client. It was a oil and gas company that wanted a tool to allow more people to do updating. And it kind of grew from there into our tool that we now sell as CAPPS. So today I'll be your presenter. I'm Nicole Jardin. I'm the founder and CEO of Emerald, and I'm joining you from Calgary. And you're stuck with me. I'm going to do the whole webinar. So I'll do the lead in, the presentation. So I'm going to show you this tool in action live, and then I'll try and tackle questions. And we've got Mary Lynn Backstrom on the line as well to tackle questions as well, if there's any that come through. Okay, so let's talk a bit about why we built this software tool. So what are some of the struggles? Well, you put all this work into making a schedule to try and get enough detail into that schedule so you can coordinate the activities of often many different players, right? So you might have a very complex job with lots of different funding sources, coordination of contractors, technology that could be coming from all around the world. So we find our projects, we're trying to fit more, squeeze more into shorter time periods, and sourcing is worldwide now. So that makes things trickier. And so P6, of course, is fantastic to help you put all that plan in place. But then where we find so many people struggle is to get the updates done. And often that's because you have a bottleneck on who's doing the updates, right? So you have maybe a handful of schedulers trying to do all the updates, coordinate with many different players, and it becomes difficult. So instead of updating often, as frequent, daily, weekly, you start to push that off to bi-weekly or every 2 weeks or once a month. And when you start to get into once a month, you're using sometimes 6 weeks old data when you're running your project. And in this day and age, that's just too much risk that you're taking on. So, we've got some other challenges are you've got scheduling teams that are all over the world, as we mentioned, and also with such different skill sets. So you want to make sure that the schedule is well put together, but that can mean quite a different things to different people. And then you get into we've got so many different software tools, right? I want to use P6, someone else wants to use Microsoft Project, someone else just wants to use Excel. So coordinating the software tools to get the updates, also very, very challenging. So that's why we put the tool together. We want timely updates. Without timely updates, we're not giving the management team the best information to make good decisions. So we're not streamlining what we're doing, which is so important. We don't want our project to go over budget. We don't want it to go over time. So we have to be able to get these inputs quickly. Okay, so there's a lot of different tools out there that you can use, but you need to be able to stay in front of any problems. And you won't have that if you're updating infrequently. And hopefully you do updates, because there was a time where when I asked the question, do you do updates, we would still get answer of no. So I'm going to ask a quick question just to see how people are doing their updating. How often do you do your updating? Again, it's going to depend on your particular situation. If you're in a turnaround type project, daily is pretty common. You might be able to do it every shift. And then if you're on a longer project, a capital project, you're shooting for weekly at minimum, but often we still have monthly. And no one is answering, we don't, because I just mentioned, don't say that. So hopefully we're at the point where we don't, but I think there are still people who put a schedule together only to, get a check mark and move on. Okay, so we've got to make it easier to update. So Emerald has CAPPS, and I'm going to run through it, and I'm going to show you how it works. We also have our TAPS tool. So if you're in a place where you need to do a lot of updates fast, like in a turnaround or an outage project or a shutdown, those are the normal terms, you should look at the TAPS tool because it is so fast, because it's just a few scans of the barcode. Okay, but you need a scanner. So what we thought was second best is the way we've got CAPPS. So you can do a few clicks on a web app and get your updates in, and that is going to allow you to deploy it if you need to on premise. You could deploy it as a hybrid in the cloud, so you could have it in the cloud with your P6 on premise, or it can be in the cloud. So it works either way. And it's designed to be used either on a laptop or an iPad type of tool. It's not. We didn't design it to be on the telephone. So TAPS can work on the telephone. If you don't have a scanner, you can use TAPS on the telephone. Okay, so if you want a telephone app only, it would be good to explore the CAPPS tool. Okay, so CAPPS could work on the phone, but it's a little small. The footprint is a little small, so I think you may not like it if you're looking for a phone app. Okay, so I'll show you how it works. As I mentioned, it's a web-based tool. It's designed as a tabular updating technology. Very easy, lightweight. You don't have to be a P6 expert to get the updates in. But we've made sure it's secure. So it does use the P6 API components to ensure security levels so that people can't access activities that they shouldn't be seeing. It's self-serve, so meaning I can go on at any time. I could do a few updates in the morning before I start my day. I can do some updates at the end of the day. And I have the data available to me live. Okay, so that's a key thing, that it's self-serve and it's live. Now, we don't want it to be live where someone can just do some updates and the poor P6 schedulers say, what just happened to my project? Okay, it's not like that. And I'm going to show you in detail how the P6 folks still have control over what's happening with these updates. So within the tool, we have an approval that you can turn on, or if you prefer to have the data flow into P6 and let the schedulers in P6 look at it and approve it, you can do it that way as well. And if you don't want them to have to look at them and approve them, and you want to allow automatic updates from CAPPS, you can do it that way too. Okay, so we have a few different approaches you can take on how you deploy it. Now then in P6, you're going to see I'm going to look at the data. I'm going to be able to reschedule. I'm going to be able to accept it and reschedule. And we'll also then be able to use just all our usual way of looking at data in P6. So that was our strategy with putting CAPPS together, was to make the P6 folks not have to change that much about how they're doing business. And you'll see that everything's going into the P6 client. I'm going to show you client, but if you prefer to use the web, all the same functionality would exist in the web. Okay. We still have most of our clients that use the client primarily, rather than the P6 web portal per se. Okay, good. So I'm going to jump into the software and actually start showing you how the tool works. Okay, can you see my P6? Hopefully you can. And is it big enough? I have made the resolution 150%, so hopefully you can see it. In the chat, throw something in the chat if you're finding it too hard to read, but maybe you can zoom in a bit as well. I'm not totally sure. Okay, So let me start with P6. Let me kind of give you the lay of the land of what I've got in P6. And then I'll jump into CAPPS. I'll show you some updating, some different ways of doing the updates, and I'll send the data uh, back into P6 so you can see how the P6 scheduler would receive the data and deal with approving it. So CAPPS is not one project at a time kind of a tool. It's a multi-project platform. So I can have many projects, and in this example, I'll just use a few. So I've got 4 here, and I've told P6 that I want to use CAPPS for updating these projects. Now, depending on how your projects are set up, you may have an updater who is going to update the whole project. Okay, so I might have a project manager who's going to be doing the updating. I may have a particular person, again, a PM in this example, who's going to receive and approve in CAPPS, or I might just have a reviewer, okay? So these set different statuses depending on what they do, but ultimately the P6 person is the one that gets the final say, okay? So I've opened these 4 projects, and I've got a layout in P6 that I'll run through to explain the different ways that you can deploy CAPPS so that you can get your updates sent in. So I just showed you the project level codes that we can use. So we can use these as a way to filter the activities to the person who's logging into CAPPS. So again, I might have one person doing the whole project, or I might have a more complicated scenario like I've got in these fields here. So in this example, I have different people who are going to actually be the submitters, or the person we're expecting to do the updates within a project. So it could be by WBS, or it could be by discipline within a WBS, okay? So if you've got an engineering group that is by discipline, and they might have a lead as well, then you can deploy this to this level of granularity. It's completely dependent on how you need it to work. So we're accessing the project codes, or we're accessing the activity codes to divvy up what someone can see up in CAPPS. Okay, so we can get very granular without making you have to do a lot more work, because you probably already tagged some responsibilities and things like that in here. Okay, so we're trying to use what we think people are already doing in P6. Now, to go further, you may feel that it makes good sense to actually give a CAPPS license to one of your vendors. So in this example, my engineering company perhaps would make sense to let them do their updates right in CAPPS, because it's very simple, doesn't take a lot of coaching. So if in that scenario, I could actually give it to the vendor and just filter on their activities so they see them and they can update them as well. Okay, so I'll show you that idea. So you can kind of put it to the level of granularity and deployment that makes sense for your project. And it's very flexible, and it's easy to set up and get the data into CAPPS so you can get it updated. That's the ultimate thing we're trying to achieve. Okay, now let's actually look at CAPPS. Okay, so I'm going to go in a web browser, and I will log in. So the login is controlled inside of P6. So we create the users of CAPPS in P6, and then we deploy their security partially in P6, because P6 will have the responsible manager security if you've ever done that. And then we have different filtering inside of CAPPS as well. So we can give the user the right set of projects, the right set of activities. Okay, so this is the most complicated view that you're going to have inside of CAPPS, because I have multiple tabs inside of CAPPS that I have available to me through my configuration. This is kind of like a layout where we set up what we want to have available to the user. Okay. Now, if your team only uses activities, or if the person that you're giving this layout to only needs activities, then you don't have to have all those tabs. Okay, so we have the ability to switch to a different layout, and you can apply it, and then those tabs will disappear. Okay, so if you feel like, whoa, that's too much stuff, we don't need all that, it's okay. We can get that off the screen and simplify it. If you have a more complicated project, you can apply a different layout to a different project. Okay, so you're not limited. You don't have to do it only one way or another. You can mix and match. And based on the layout that you're using, you can use it for different projects as well. Okay, so I'm going to go back to all tabs for a moment and start there, and then we'll show you some simpler methods of updating as well. So when I'm in the task window, so activities, basically, I have many fields that I might have on my screen for my different updating. Okay. Now, I don't have to have all those fields on the screen. I can only use the ones that I need for my particular project. Okay. Again, I can mix and match. I can make different layouts, have different fields. So it's sort of like a layout. It's a little more lightweight than a layout in terms of how you set it up. Okay, but that's how I can pare this back and control what I'm seeing. I can rearrange the columns. I can put filters on. So very easy to use. Again, you don't need to be an expert in P6 to do the updating. So let's start with a very simple updating. And I'm going to go to this layout. And I'm going to act as if we've logged into CAPPS, I should say. And we're going to do some updating. And I'm going to do updating just for a particular vendor. So Engineering X. Okay. So I have access to lots more activities. But if I just wanted to update one vendor, okay, like for example, I might be in a meeting with that particular vendor to get their weekly status. Okay, so this is how quick this could be. It's like just pull a filter and I get their activities on the screen. I could even do a look ahead filter. So some of you might be familiar with doing look aheads. So is before, and we can put a date in there. Okay, so I'll say, give me anything coming up, let's say in the next 2 months, and I can filter that down. Okay, so very simple, very lightweight, not very complicated, and easy to kind of get that filtered down. Okay, so then I could start doing my updates. Now, that's filtered it down a considerable amount. I don't have a lot of wonderful activities in there. So let me see if I can take that off for the moment. So I'll just clear that and just get a little bit more on the screen here for us to look at for another minute. Now, you might see some other things that look familiar to you in P6. So we use the same concept here to show you whether something's in progress or not started yet, whether something's a milestone. And you can usually tell because there's only one date, so finish date versus a start. And we added a little bit of hopefully helpful field here called critical. So we should have red. We should have some oranges. I'm not seeing any right now. And that would be like a near critical. So that's usually within 2 weeks, something like that, but it's configurable. So you have an idea of which ones are a problem here, okay? Or you need a bit more attention. So you could very, very quickly just get those critical activities here and look at those too. So this can be a really handy tool, not only for updating, but also some different conversations. You could also deploy it to your project managers if they wanted to have a bit better idea of what's on their plate and what's going on with their project, okay? So it's a very handy tabular view of activities as well, okay? Now, there's also another field here, which is not going to be familiar because it is a CAPPS field. So this is the status of the business process status of the particular activity being submitted into P6. So you can see these two on the last update were accepted or approved by the P6 scheduler. You can see this one, not so good. So one was rejected and one had a note. So it wasn't outright rejected, but it was with a note here, okay? And then the other one here is letting me know that the last update hasn't been approved or reviewed by anybody yet. Okay, so those are the different visual cues that you're getting on what's happened with the CAPPS updates. Okay. Okay, so let's actually do some updates and then you'll get an idea of how you could use it with your team. So we usually update start and finish dates. That's pretty common. And then how you update the rest might vary. Okay, so some people might be using resources, expenses, etc. We're going to skip that for the first example. We're going to just make it simple and do the start, the finish dates, and the remaining duration. Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and do some updates. I'm just going to take a look at a few of these here, and we'll run through some updates. So I've got, let's do this first activity. So this activity was already started, and because this is a demo database, some of it might be a little weird. So it started and it's planned to be finished way out in 2023. So it's still got quite a bit of time left on it based on the calculation. Now, let's just say that we actually got it finished and we finished it super early in comparison if we're going to pull it into, let's say, this week. Now, in that case, I'm finishing the activity, so my remaining duration should typically be 0. And I could put a note on here. Okay, so we have 2 notes available in this field. So we have just a short form and we also have a notebook. So you can use either one. Okay, so you're not limited and you can do both here. Okay, we got done early. Okay, so that's one update done on an activity that was already started. So I could also start an activity. Okay, so this is again a little bit of a weird example because this activity is supposed to be next year, but let's say we started it. I'm just going to sort this chronologically. Okay, so I started it and I'm going to bring it back to this year. So it's going to be way ahead. And I'll say that it got started this week as well. Now, when you start an activity, you normally put in how much is left. Okay. So how much is left right now is saying 60 days. I might say that I've got, although I started it, maybe I'm going to be 100 days. Okay. So I've started it way early, but it's going to be longer. Okay. So that could happen, in which case I can forecast it to go longer. Now the percent complete will get calculated as I do the work and send it into P6. Now, This last one was rejected, so I need to do some more updates on this. And I might want to understand, well, what was rejected? What was rejected about this? Okay. So the typical way you see that is in the deviations and requests. So the information about the review of the activity sits inside of here if they've put in a note. Okay, so the notes would show in here. So in this case, this activity is turnover to retube B5 operation. It's engineering X. So I can filter this down just to see those engineering X activities, which just makes it a little bit easier on trying to understand what I'm looking at. And then the activity should be in here. I'm not seeing it, so this is interesting. So let's just clear this out. Let's just go see. It was rejected, I think, last time. Okay, there it is. So that just makes it easier. So I just use the filter to see the rejections. And here's the note here from the scheduler. Please review dates and, not very good typing, resubmit. Okay, so it looks like there was a question on the dates, so I can go back and I can take a look at that one. And yeah, maybe I put the wrong start date. Okay, so I can go ahead and update that and switch that date. Okay, so that's how you can use the tool. And then I can put in a note. So it could be a short note in here. In my case, I fixed the start date. Review. Now, maybe that's too short of a user-defined field, right? It's a few hundred characters. If that's too short, I can make a longer note and maybe explain why I put the date in, okay? And this is going to go into a notebook. Okay. Okay, so I made a few different updates and we should be able to submit whenever we're ready. Okay, so maybe I had only a few minutes and I made my edits. I can submit it. Now I can also do a few other things here. So let me show you. So we have the ability also to actually allow the user doing the updates to edit certain activity codes. Now this activity is an activity code. Now this is also an activity code. And in this case, I've made it editable. Okay, so we have the configuration capability of allowing certain codes to be editable and certain codes not to be editable. Okay? So very, very flexible. We can add additional fields if there's a specific need. We can add additional fields to the system as well. So it's configurable from that perspective as well. Okay, so when I've done the updates that I want to, at any point, I can save the progress and submit it. This is going to submit it into P6. So it says, okay, it's been submitted and it's going into P6. Now, I could also have an approver or reviewer in CAPPS who just reviews it. That's an option. Now, I'm going to just forego that only for time's sake for the webinar. And I'm going to go in and show you what it looks like to the person receiving it. So very simple. I just create a layout that's got my activities and should be in a receiving mode. Okay, so very simple on how I built this. It's just a filter with a date stamp on it because I have a CAPPS last submitted date. That's how complex this is. So it's not complicated. It doesn't add a lot of learning curve, I guess is the best way to put it for your schedulers. Okay. Now, I see a few questions, so let me just touch on those before I go too far. Can we set up CAPPS to show cost and schedule performance index? CPI, SPI, yeah, we could add those fields to the software, definitely. That is definitely a possibility. Can we link movement such as rejection or approval of updates to email, SAP or text message, direct notification? We didn't build it that way. We did not build it so that there's approvals off of an email off of each input. Now, I think that would be annoying, so I'm not too sure if others would think that could be annoying. But I'm not sure if you're asking for it to notify somebody that there's updates that they need to look at. That could be entertained, but the idea was meant to be something that you would just log into every day, every few days, depending, and just go ahead and do your part, okay? So it's more of a self-service app is how we designed it. So not so much on the emailing side, if I'm understanding the question correctly. Okay, now, depending on, again, how you do the approvals, no matter what, we've got the capability of the P6 folks being the last point, if you will, of the approval. So this is my layout. So I log in the morning and I just open this layout first thing in the morning. And then maybe after lunch, I open this layout. Okay, depending again how often you're expecting stuff to come in. And if there's nothing in this layout, it means nothing's been submitted. Okay. Now I did submit something, so I can see a few submissions here. Now I can see who submitted it. It's right here. And I can see when they submitted it. I can even put the timestamp on there. Okay, just for sake of space on the webinar, I left it just down to the day. And then I can see what's happening with this. So I can see that they've been submitted. I'll show you this. And this is the way that this thing works. So it's either under review, so I'm looking at it, I'm not sure if I like this update, I'm going to reject it. If there's a problem with it, I can reject it, which is what that X was that we saw. And that under review, that is that yield sign that we saw. And the approved is the check mark. Okay, now before I do that, I should probably look at what they sent us. Okay, so let's take a look. So very simple here. So if I want to put it, oops, I don't know why it does this to me in this layout. Here we go. So this is the note that I can send back to the person who's doing the updating. Okay, so if I'm happy with this, I can clear this note. So that will be my final communication. So these are my communication back fields. And these are the communications of what they've actually put in to CAPPS. Okay, so very simple. It's what you guys do all day using P6. So that was the key thing for us, was to make it lightweight from the perspective of the learning curve. So I can see here that they're trying to complete the activity, or as I did update 1 to being finished. And these other 3 were in progress. Okay. Now, currently, these activities are 50%, 0, 0, and 0%. What they've submitted is going to try and make this 100%, 11%, and this old one was 56%. So this is from a previous update, okay? So it's showing you what it is now, what they've submitted all the way through. Now, these activities have steps on them, but I didn't update those for the moment. I'll show you that in the next update cycle. Okay, so we'll just do a simple example first. Okay, so here I can see the notes that the person put in on the submission. Now I can see the user-defined field, or I can see the update with the note in the notebook. Okay, so if they've used a notebook, I could see it here. Okay, and it's got a timestamp on it here, so you can see where that update came from. Okay, now let's move over a little bit more here. So then we want to look at what they actually gave us. So we have some start date information and we have finish date information. So I moved those activities around quite a bit, as you saw. So this is letting me know that they've started better than the plan. So the plan is 28th of June 2023. I tried to update it to much, much earlier. So that's earlier. So it's giving you some indicators. So you know right away whether they did something that looks beneficial or doesn't look beneficial. Okay. So in this example, the finish date is giving me a warning that the finish has changed considerably. Okay. So again, you need to double check that. So it's a warning. It's not giving you a green. It's giving you a warning. So it doesn't look bad. So it's not a later date, but it's changed considerably. So it's got a warning on it for you. Okay. So you can look at it. So again, we tried to put a lot of visual cues to help the scheduler filter, of course, find them very quickly and also deal with them quickly. So that was the objective. Now, the duration might have changed considerably. Okay, so we're flagging that as well. So the original duration and the remaining duration, and we're seeing that there's a variance. Okay, so again, it's warning you. It's not blocking you. It's just letting you know that there is a change here. Okay, so those are things to watch and see whether you're comfortable with those changes or not. Now, I didn't do anything too complicated in this example, so I might accept these changes. And on the next update, we can do something a little bit more complicated. So we can use the suspend and resume date. We have that in the tool. We have labor, which I didn't update at all. I didn't do resources at all. We have expenses. Again, I didn't do them in the last round, so I can do some updating there. And then it's letting us know where we're at with the last time we accepted the updates and so on. Okay, so this is the extent of the complexity on how the person receives it into P6. So if I'm okay with those updates, I can accept them. I can approve them. And I do have a layout that's flipping this on me, so I can approve them. You can see I've got it in the layout. You don't have to have it that way, but you certainly can. And I can just, in this example, I'm going to approve all of them. Okay, so once I do that, I can then tell CAPPS that I finished looking at them and go ahead and run the utility to accept those changes. Okay, because we want to make sure that we tell P6 that we're finished doing the approvals. Okay, so we do the approvals in the activities and then we run the final approval here at the project level. Now that's also going to be important if you have schedulers who work in the same project. Okay, so that can happen. It's not necessarily everywhere, but we definitely have clients that have multiple schedulers in one project. We can attach or paste photos into the notebook, right? We did not open that functionality up in CAPPS. We didn't think most people would want to do that via CAPPS, but certainly it's an enhancement that we can look at. Okay, so currently it's not allowing you to paste in an image, but we can look at whether we can provide such capability if it's desirable. Okay, so we hit this go button. Whoops, I don't know if I saved it. And then we hit refresh. And what it's going to do is it's going to work through those activities and it should move all the dates from the CAPPS fields to the P6 fields. Okay. So depending on how many updates you have, how many projects, etc., this might take a minute or two. And then what it should do, it should accept the changes, and we should see this flip to pass, as we saw a minute ago. And we should see the last run date get updated. Okay. I probably didn't need to hit all these projects. It might take a little longer than I was hoping. But we'll let it continue doing that. Okay, so there's a fail on here. It's probably one of my dates didn't make sense. That's usually what would cause a failure. Okay, so that's not what you're looking for. Obviously, I probably did something wrong in the update. So let's just go back and you'll see. So it would have approved these, and what it does is it starts to move the activities and the percent completes to the appropriate fields in P6. So then I can go and do another round of updating. Okay, so I can log in as a different user. In my case, I'll use the same user, and I can do some more updating. And I should see more and more of these activities, because I just approved them, have this little check mark. Okay, and that's what we're expecting to see. And it's not the end of the world if something hasn't been reviewed yet. So that's what this example is showing. There was something submitted, but it didn't get reviewed yet. And we're just waiting on that to be reviewed by the team. Okay. So let's look at some more complicated updating that we might want to do. So we might want to look at resources, steps, expenses, and maybe some deviations. So we'll look at that in a bit more detail. So let me go back and I'll start on the activities. So the window's a little different than the last time. I've got a different order of columns, which is fine because you can have different layouts and you can easily drag and drop these columns around. And as I showed you earlier, we can pick. We don't have to have all the columns on the screen. Okay. So if you really want a very, very simple updating method with just very few fields, this is probably a closer example to what you might have. So just a few fields on the screen, very, very easy to use. And this can fit very easily on a tablet, no problem at all. I've got it zoomed in quite a bit because I'm on a big monitor. Okay, so you can configure this. As you saw, it's easy to rearrange the columns. It's easy to pick the ones you want on the screen. You can filter, as I showed you, so very easy to work with, even if you're not a P6 expert by any stretch. Okay, so let's go back to doing a little bit more complicated updating. So I want to show you that we can actually do activities, resources, expenses, and steps. So I'll do a little bit more elaborate updating in this example. So I have here a civil engineering work package. It's my engineering X group by civil discipline. And this particular activity, it has activity only. There's no expenses, no steps. There's resources only, plus the activity, which we're on, but it doesn't have expenses or steps. So the second example might be a better one for us to try. Okay, and that's our engineering work package release to document control. Okay, so I started this activity a little while ago. It's not finished yet. I can see it's got a float of 0, so it would be critical. Now, depending on my updating methodology, just scroll over a bit here, I might be updating with remaining duration. I think I zoomed out a little bit too much, so now it's a little fussy to maneuver. Okay, there we go. That's better. And I'll put my remaining duration over here because it'll be easier for me to do the update. That's better. So I've got 15 days left. You can see I did a suspend on this and I have an expected finish. Maybe I got back to starting this finally. Okay, so I'll go ahead and put that in there. And then this expected finish, I can clear it. Oops. Maybe it's not letting me. Let's try and clear that out. Yeah, for some reason it's not letting me here. So we'll see how this works. It may not work. And then if I go back over this way, I can navigate very easily to resources, expenses, and steps. Okay, so let's go ahead and try that. So I click on resources, and then it navigates automatically to that tab, and it's automatically on the activity that I navigate it from. Now, again, depending on how you do it, we have some clients who give the steps and the resources to their engineering folks. And that's the tabs that they give them, okay? So if I want to start an activity in this tab, I can use this little check mark, which starts it. Now this one was already started, so I don't need to do that again. And then I have my different resources. Now I might have one or many. Here's an example of multiple resources here. So I've got a superintendent or foreman on this. And in this example, I've got equipment as well. Okay, so if you use labor, equipment, and materials, you can update all of them. So this would be a good example of all the different types here. Okay, so we can update that one. So we can say it got started today. I guess I'm in the wrong year. Let me go backwards. I can say it got started today. And then I can update all of those resources as well. Okay, so we can do all the updating on the resources in one view, which is very, very handy. So I've got my budgeted units. I can put in my actual, and the computer will try to recalculate holding the budget. Now, if you know you're going to go over, you can update that. So that's fine too. And it's calculating the percent. Now it's just doing straight math here. It's a rough percent complete for you on that particular resource. So it can be a slight different amount in P6 itself. But we're just trying to give some fast, quick calculations for the users. Okay. On that engineering one, so this one already was updated. And we can update it some more. So maybe we know we're going over, and we know we're running over on that. And then it just used the calculation to do the estimate to complete, but then we might be able to revise that. Okay, so we might be going over even more. Okay, so I did a few updates on the resources. Again, we can navigate to the other tabs using these quick little hyperlinks if we want, or if we prefer, we can go to the tab and do the whole list of updates. Completely whatever makes sense. And as we saw on the activity window, we have filtering capability here as well. Okay, so maybe I need to just do engineering X's activities. Maybe I need to do a few different vendors. So maybe there's a few vendors that I am in charge of. So I can just filter those as well. Okay, so we're using the activity code onto the resource window as well. Okay, so very, very functional, easy to navigate for the user. So I'd like to do some expense updating as well. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to use that little expense icon to navigate and then be on the activity that I wanted. Okay. And then I can start updating expenses. So Expenses are usually money related. You can have units on expenses as well, and we can update those. Okay, so I've got my budget, and then I've got my previous actuals, and maybe my actuals have gone up, and I can do my estimate to complete. Okay, so if I know that I'm actually going to do better on it, I can bring that value down. Okay, so you can do the updating of your expenses quite easily. And then let's look at steps. So steps, same thing. We have a window dedicated to steps, and you can start activities in here if you need to. This one's already started, and then I can update the steps. So this one's not started, or it is started. Okay, awesome. And I should have been able to see that actually. It's right there. I just didn't see it. And then we can update the steps. So with steps, you can update steps to be completed, or you can update a step to be just a certain percentage of progress. So we can do both. And then we've got a note here. And you can type those in. So you've got the communication on what's going on with the steps. Okay, so it's quite easy to use. And then again, you can put a note. Then if we want to understand any additional communications, so that's the approval window. So that's what this little icon is. So that's a new icon. And then you've got the different notes that you can put in. Okay. So we have a few fields that we've added to the system here. So let's touch on those. Now you can see we're trying to give the reviewer and the final submitter a bit of information here. So this is saying it's not looking good on our duration. Our labor is over based on the updates currently, and the expenses are good. We're under on the expenses. Okay, so again, I can filter on these. Negative values are bad, positive values are good. So I can do some filtering on here and filter anything that's less than 0 would give you the negatives, and you can apply it. So again, we tried to make it mostly easy to update. That was the objective. And then lightweight with as much communication to the user, to the reviewer, if you're going to review in CAPPS as possible. Now, some of our clients wanted the ability to tag whether we think we need a change in scope. So we called it a deviation request in here. That's what this DR acronym is. And this is another thing that you can do. So we think that we're going to need a deviation for a particular reason. So we could put that in there. So this is not a good example. Let's use this one. So we do think that we're having a problem here, and maybe we need to actually say that there's a deviation request and there's been a design change in here, release of documents. So this is just a quick way to flag that you think there's a change required. Okay. Now this is a bit configurable because not each client uses it in the same manner, but just want to give you the idea of what's possible in there. Okay, so I did a few updates, and I'm going to save the progress and go back to P6 and refresh my view. So I just have to hit the refresh button, and I should see those new updates coming into the system. Okay, so here we've got a few more updates. Now those updates, again, going to depend on what I did there. So I did some updates on the this was the construction activity. Sorry, I don't know why it does that on this layout. There you go. So we updated a bit of the labor, and I put in 1,200 hours. I could have updated some of the quantities. I didn't, just for sake of time. So that one's ready, and it's giving you the estimate to complete and the percent complete that it's going to use once we approve these changes. Okay, so that's one update. That's on the resource side. Now, I can also, of course, look at dates, which we've already done. So I can also look at it this way. So I can scroll over, and I've got some information here about the durations and the resources. So I just scrolling over because there's a lot of updates here. And you could also put this in more than one layout. Okay, I just put it all in one just to make it easy. So this is letting me know that we've got a problem on the resources. So something to watch for as the scheduler before you just willy-nilly approve it. You want to just make sure you're comfortable with what's been submitted. And then the expenses. Okay, so this is the one that I did some expense updating on, so we could take a look at that. So I did the actual units, I bumped those up, the estimate to complete was there, and then we're seeing where we're at on percent completes, etc. Okay, so that gives you an idea of resources, expenses. Let's look at steps. So we also have the updating on steps that we can see. So I had that issued for instructions, review, issued for construction, and I've got the updates coming in on the steps. Okay, so steps are also very, very handy. We've deployed this with a client where the engineering group did the step updating, and that was their primary focus. Was just to use the step sheet for all the updating. Okay, so you can do it in many different ways. And then same thing, I can either approve the what was submitted, okay, or I could reject it, and I would normally put a note, okay, if I'm going to reject. Okay, and same process that I showed you earlier. And then once again, I would go to the project and I would say, I'm ready to accept these changes, and off you go. So that is a quick overview of how to do the updates in CAPPS, get them pushed into P6, and then get the updates through the system. Okay, now I don't see any explicit questions right now about showing a particular feature. But of course, you can keep asking questions. And I'll go back to the PowerPoint just to wrap up. Okay, I think we've got it. Okay, so yeah, so we have a lot of different clients using this tool in different venues and for different purposes. So I mentioned one of the original users and why we built it. So this particular group had capital projects as well as turnarounds and small projects that and operations. They needed their PMs to be able to do the updates. Their schedulers were just too swamped. So that was really what we were able to do, was to deploy the tool. They needed to update the dates every 2 weeks, and they needed the costs updated at minimum once a month. So they were able to achieve that, and improved the issue management was the big thing, so that they didn't have so many bottlenecks and so many pinch points. So that was a big one. So another example, this was an engineering example, where they use the steps to update the engineering packages by discipline. So very interesting example where they started to get their updates going much, much quicker and had, again, less bottlenecks because of that improved updating. Some other examples we have are clients with major programs uh, on airport projects as well as major building projects where they're updating, their PMs are updating the projects every few days because they've got CAPPS available to them. Okay, so that gives you some different ideas there. Okay, great. So the key thing here is the tool's fast and it's easy to use, and the team can do their updates much more regularly. So that's the big advantage there. And trying to get the updates to the different team members so we can get them in quickly is the desired effect, and that's what we're seeing. The updates are simple, forecasting is simple, and understanding earned value now because we can have resources, we can have some expenses instead of not having them in the schedule is the big win there. Okay, so hopefully you saw something of interest. You know, updating can be very, very difficult, and we have this tool, as I mentioned. We've got our TAPS tool. If you want a phone app or you want a barcode scanning app, join us for that webinar and see what that could bring to the table. And then we also have the team member app from Oracle in the toolkit as well. And finally, it's not exactly built for updating, but we do have some clients who use our P6 loader, which is our Excel tool for updating as well. So we've got 4 different options that we've used with different clients for updating. Now we have other tools, as I mentioned. So I mentioned the CAPPS tool. Next week, we've got some P6 QA webinars coming. So if you want a better way to critique schedules quickly, either your own or schedules you're importing, definitely join us for that. If you do a lot of importing of schedules and you don't like messing up your P6 database with those, look at our P6 Scrubber tool. And if you find that there's things that you just wish P6 did that it doesn't do, just to make things faster, join our P6 calculator webinar because we've got all sorts of little utilities we've built for clients to make P6 work better for them. So one of the ones that's new to that is auto logicking, built for specific functions. Okay, so lots of different food for thought in those webinars. Okay, now I'm just going to put one quick question up there. So if you did see something of interest, please let us know how you would like us to follow up. If you do want us to reach out to talk to you about a future project or just stay on the mailing list, or if you want us to reach out to others or whatnot, please just let us know. That way we're following up appropriately with your considering your time and your schedule and how busy everyone always is. And on here, I think I've got my phone number, my email, and of course, you can also reach out to Donna in the Philippines. She may be closer to you, and she's a fantastic point of contact. So you can reach out to Donna. And if she didn't share her email, I'm sure she'll share it in the chat in a minute, and you can reach out that way. Okay, I can stay on for another few minutes if there's any questions coming to mind. If they come up after the webinar, which happens pretty regularly, go ahead and reach out and we'll communicate via email or phone.